Okay, so this unit was chapter 10, and it was over chemical quantities. And a big part of this chapter, I would say, was the mole and doing calculations with this. And for chemical quantities, the standard things that we had to learn and that we did learn was how we describe methods of measuring the amount of something, defining Avogadro's number as it relates to a mole of a substance, which we did many worksheets on, distinguishing between the atomic mass of an element and its molar mass, describing how the mass of a mole of a compound is calculated, describe how to convert the mass of a substance to the number of a mole of a substance and moles to mass, which we did repetitively over and over to get in our head, because I had no clue how to do that before this. Then we learned how to identify the volume of a quantity of gas, how to describe and calculate the percent by mass of an element in a compound, how to interpret an empirical formula and distinguish between an empirical formula and a molecular formula. So these are some important things that we worked on and went in worksheets together as a class. So that helped, because otherwise before that I had no clue what was going on. So trying to relate moles and the measurement of matter back to real life, we can think that every year contestants from all over the world travel to Harrison Hot Springs in British Columbia, Canada, to compete in the World Championship Sand Sculpture Contest. Each contestant creates a beautiful work of art on millions of tiny grains of sand. You can measure the amount of sand in a sculpture by counting the grains of sand, but wouldn't it be much easier to weigh the sand? In this section or unit, which we did, we discovered how chemists measured the amount of a substance using a unit called mole. So just thinking about that, because otherwise I didn't know what a mole was, reflecting this and measuring the sand, which is very hard to do with the tiny grains, we can do it easier by taking mole and calculating that. And also in chapter 10, we learned the certain or different types of methods that we use to measure something. And we discovered that there are many different ways to determine the mass, and you can buy things. You can do it by kilograms, pound, ounce, gram, liter, gallon, or volume. But you will often measure the amount of something by one of the three methods, which would be by count, by mass, and by the volume of something. Also, we learned how Avogadro's number is related to a mole of any substance. And it is basically just the number of particles in one mole of any substance. And that is why when we do equations, we do 1 mole and then we times it by the particles, or whatever the number is, 6.02 times 10 to the 23rd. And that is why we do that. And just kind of flipping through this, some more examples that relate back to real life is when we compare the mole mass and mole volume in relationships. So, say you're guessing how many jelly beans are in a container, and if you win, you get a prize. You decide to enter the contest and you win. Was it just a lucky guess? Well, not exactly. You estimated the length and diameter of a jelly bean to find its approximate volume. Then you estimated the dimensions of the container to obtain its volume. You did the arithmetic and you made your guess. In a similar way, chemists use the relationships between the mole and quantities such as mass, volume, and number of particles to solve chemistry problems. In this section, we find out how the mole and mass are related. So when we had that student teacher, he came in and he gave us Skittles. And we each got Skittles, and then in the front of the classroom, he had a huge jar, and we had to try to guess how many we could do. Well, at first, I didn't know how I was going to do this, and then I remember that we compared the mole mass and the mole volume, and it really isn't as hard as it seems. So once we did this, we did some fun activities in this unit, which taught us a lot about the mole relationships and how to work through problems related with this.